this new teaching. Also, by that time, some French priests started to come in by about 1860, using like fishing boats in midnight, getting in on the coast from China, coming into the Korean coast secretly. French priests, and going in the deep countryside in the mountains, hiding, including Boreum town, in Chungcheongnam-do in particular, hiding in the mountains and teaching Christianity to Korean people. They were caught, they were killed. By 1866 was the biggest killing, the biggest program, again run by the Daewon-gun, that same guy, the king's father, to organize this as his resistance against foreigners, stop foreign culture. They killed like 11,000 Koreans. In those days, that's a lot of people. The whole population of Korea was less than 10 million at the time. They killed 11,000 Koreans. And it was really pretty amazing. They would arrest them and torture them and beat them, and then tell them, you can go home, we'll let you go free. Just swear that you don't believe. Put your foot on the Bible and swear that I do not believe in Jesus Christ, I don't believe in God, I am not a Christian. Then we let you go home to your family. You're free. 11,000 Koreans said, no, I believe. I believe in God, I believe in Jesus, and got killed for that, tortured and killed. 11,000 of them. 1,100 of those are now becoming saints of the Catholic Church. Saints, it's the biggest group of people from any country that has ever, in the Catholic Church history, become saints. Pope John Paul II made 1,100 of them who had demonstrated miracles and such, becoming saints. This is arranged by the Daewon-gun. A lot of this killing was right here in Seoul. Right here in Seoul by the Han River was Joldusan, which means cutting head rock. Right over the Han River, they would cut off people's heads and let it roll down the hill into the river, to be especially insulting to those people and not let them be buried completely as you should be and such. And the Sosa-moon, the Sosa-moon, I cannot pronounce this right, the small south gate right behind Seoul train station now, right behind Seoul train station, there's a park there. That's where they killed even a few thousand Korean Catholic Christians in 1866. That is now a holy ground of the Korean Catholic Church. It's been under reconstruction for a few years. They're going to reopen. Pope John Paul II himself blessed that area, etc. for the sainthood. So they did this. Now, the French took revenge. The French had a navy in China. Remember what's called Tianjin. Tianjin. The city of China today, it's like 11 million people. It's outside of Beijing. It's part of the giant Beijing megalopolis, but it's like 10 million people in itself. Port city there, facing towards Korea on the Yellow Sea. That was a French colony. That was France's main colony in all of East Asia except for Indochina. And so the French Navy ships were already there in Tianjin, and they had revenge attack. They attacked Ganghwa Island 5 years before the Americans. The French did. They did the same thing like what you see in the drama. The cannons, the soldiers, they had a victory, an easy victory. They robbed the royal library. There was a royal library on Ganghwa Island still there, so they robbed documents out of there, which only got returned to Korea 10 years ago. Very dramatically, a little more than 10 years ago, something brought back to Korea. So that was a big deal, this French revenge attack. This made the Koreans very afraid. This is the first time that foreigners, Westerners, had actually attacked Korea, and they had an easy victory with their cannons and their modern guns and such. The Korean soldiers were very brave and they fought strongly, but they lost pretty quickly. And so the Koreans got afraid, like, well, what can we do? What should we do? We're trying to just remain closed. The Daewon-gun said, just be closed. Keep the door closed. Keep those foreigners out. That was still his policy. But people in Korea were getting worried. Then, at the same time, The General Sherman in 1866. This all happened in 1866. In 1 year, all 4 of these things. The General Sherman. Now, General Sherman is the name of an army general from the Civil War. At the end of the Civil War, he was one of Lincoln's top generals, of President Lincoln, and he was really major to help defeat the South part, and he was very terrible and cruel general also, but he did. And so this American captain who had a ship, he was just a ship captain, a trading merchant captain in Shanghai, he named his new ship General Sherman. He just gave that name because General Sherman was a big hero from 1 year ago in America. So he named his ship the General Sherman, American captain. He hired a bunch of Chinese crewmen, about 30 Chinese men, to crew his ship. He was the only American on the ship, but the ship had an American flag. And he said, I'm going to go to Joseon, Korea, to trade. I'm going to trade. I'm going to make money, make lots of money. Nobody trades with Joseon, so I'm going to. Other people in Shanghai, like the British, they told him, no, you can't do that. It's illegal. The Koreans, they will shoot at you. They'll try to kill you. No foreigners are allowed in Korea. You cannot trade with them. But he said, I'm going to do it. A typical arrogant American will not listen to anybody as they go to Iran, Iraq, and such places like that. Don't listen to foreigners. And so he said, I'm going to go. So he went with his 30 Chinese crew, and a Scottish missionary joined him, a Scottish Christian missionary, Protestant, from Scotland. He had a big box full of Bibles written in Chinese language, and he wanted to take me with you, I want to go to Joseon. Big mistake. Now, they went to the coast of Joseon, and they found the Daedong River, the opening of the Daedong River up north. They sailed up the Daedong River. They tried to stop at a few villages, and the Koreans were just, no, get out of here, what are you doing? Go back, no foreigners, and would not take the Bibles from the missionary and whatever. Just no. So they kept going up the river. These were very arrogant people heading towards Pyongyang City. And just outside of Pyongyang City, the river is very shallow. It's very low water. Actually, they tried to turn around the ship. It got stuck in the sand. The ship was just stuck. It couldn't move. Then the Korean soldiers came out of Pyongyang City, having been alerted. It was a few hours away. As they marched on down there, they saw this ship sitting in the river, and they aimed their fire arrows, shot fire arrows at the ship. The ship started burning. The people jumped off the ship, and some of them drowned in the river. Some of them were shot by the Korean soldiers. They're all killed. The 30 Chinese, the American captain, the Scottish minister, they're all killed, and the ship burned to the ground, burned to the water, totally gone. Now, this is really nothing. This is the first incident between America and Korea ever in history. It's not a good beginning. It's not a strong beginning of a thing, but it's the first time those two countries are ever involved with each other. And North Korea, interestingly, now memorializes this. They think it's a big deal. North Korea says that this was Korea's first victory over America. And Korea defeated America, the whole country, for the first time. And Korean War was just the second time that Korea defeated America. That's what they say. Korea defeated America in the Korean War also. 1953, they say that was Victory Day, July 27th. They say, and they have a whole museum now by the Daedong River, which is now in part of Pyongyang City, out in the suburbs. There's a whole museum of relics that they dug up from the American ships, a few uniform pieces of brass, and a cannon, small cannon. They have a museum about that, and they celebrate it as Korea's victory over the imperialists. And they even make the claim that Kim Il-sung's grandfather, Kim Il-sung, the first dictator of North Korea, that his grandfather was the leader of the soldiers who came out of Pyongyang. Kim Il-sung's family is from Pyongyang. They say his grandfather was the leader of the soldiers who came out and burned that ship and killed the American captain. They claim that. Historians think this is completely not true. His grandfather was not a military man as such. But North Korea claims this, and this is probably why then Kim Il-sung was qualified to be dictator of North Korea, because his grandfather killed the American ship captain and all this. So they did this. It's just part of the thing. Now, Americans did nothing for 5 years, but this percolated back to Washington, D.C., that an American ship captain was killed, and the American flag was on the ship, but it got burned. And so they were pressing through China. They sent messages to China that Korea should apologize to America. Korea said, no, we're not going to apologize. No, he broke the law. It was illegal, that's it. And so America heard about how the French attacked Ganghwa Island in revenge. And by this time, America, the government, was getting kind of feisty. They wanted to show themselves something in the world. And they said, well, we should do like the French did. We should punish Korea for killing our ship captain. And so it was 5 years later, but they found out America did not have any navy over here in East Asia. They really didn't have any navy on the West Coast at all. It took a long time before they actually had some ships with cannons. It took them 5 years to organize, but they did, and they came over here and docked over in China for a while with the British, and then sailed up here to Korea. Lieutenant Schufelt leading the way, and attacked Ganghwa Island like the French had done, and defeated. Just to show this, they were demanding that Korea should open up and trade with America. Korea was not going to trade with any country. Then the Japanese did it. Japanese attack on Ganghwa Island, 1875. So just 4 years later, the Japanese had, for a long time, since 1860, Japanese were pushing Korea open for trade, allow our factory products to come into Korea, exchange, you give us ginseng and we'll give you factory products, let's trade. And Korea was saying, nope, 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 you are third-class barbarian pirates who attacked us in the Imjin War, and we will not trade with you, barbarians. So the Japanese getting upset, and they attacked in 1875, and then returned with diplomacy after having, again, had the easy victory on Ganghwa Island using their new modern guns. They got the Treaty of Ganghwa, 1876, which allowed Japan to trade with Korea. The first country allowed to do so, except China previously a little bit and such. It allowed Japanese to come into Busan City at first, and to Busan to start trading their factory goods. Japanese businessmen started coming into Korea to major city areas, bringing factory products from Japan, selling them to Korean people, starting making money. Koreans didn't like it, but it happened. Yuan Shikai. Later, he was the first president of the Republic of China. When China overthrew the Manchu dynasty, 1912, and created Republic of China, he was the first president. Yuan Shikai, a very important man. He was a military man, but also a diplomat, a very smart man. He was, some people said at that time, people called him the smartest man in China, the most knowledgeable. He knew the world. He knew about Europe. He knew America. He understood that there was something called Brazil way down there. He had maps. He knew the world, which very few people did at that time. An intelligent diplomat. He was sent as the Chinese resident governor of Korea. China didn't have this before, but now China started to see that Joseon dynasty was in trouble, and an older brother, younger brother, they said, we need a top Chinese guy there in Hanyang City, Seoul, to supervise what's going on, because they really hated the Japanese. They did not want the Japanese to get powerful in Korea. So they sent him. And Koreans went to him, the Korean leadership under King Kojong went to him, to Yuan Shikai, and asked his advice. They said, what should we do? These foreigners, these barbarians, they're coming. There's the French, there's Germans, there's British, Russians are showing up. What should we do? He said, Yuan Shikai told them, deal with the Americans. And Koreans said, why? Americans attacked us at Ganghwa Island, 1871. He said, no, you talk to the Americans. Why? Because Americans are just businessmen. They're not trying to take over your country. The French, they want to take over your country. Look what they did, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. They took them as colonies. The British, well, of course, the British, India, every other place, the British taking colonies. Britain is an empire. And the Germans are building a new empire, like in Africa, and Germans already had a colony in China, Qingdao City colony. So those are empires. They want to take over your country. The Americans just want money, and which is fairly true. Historically, and later our President Calvin Coolidge said this very succinctly. Calvin Coolidge said, the business of America is business. All we want to do is buy and sell. Like after World War II, we defeated Germany, we took over Europe. We didn't keep Europe, we didn't colonize Europe, we just traded with them. We just set up business. And Western Europe got rich, and we got rich. Everybody got rich by doing business. And the same thing with Japan. We didn't take over Japan, we did. We took over Japan as a colony for 7 years, but only 7 years. Then we gave them their independence back and just traded with them, back and forth, trade, business. Japan got rich, America got rich. Everybody gets rich by doing business together, right? That's all America wants. Yuan Shikai, he knew this. Back in 1880, he was that smart, he understood this, and he said, so talk to the Americans. So Korea did. Starting in 1881, there was actual diplomacy. They had Americans sent the ship back. The same Lieutenant Schufelt who led the attack now led his ships back. Maybe he was the only American who actually knew where Korea was, how to get to the capital of Korea. He was the only one who knew. He brought them back, and they did diplomacy, and they opened relations and such. 1881, they had the Schufelt, Lieutenant Schufelt, what's called the Schufelt Treaty of Peace, Amity, and Commerce and Navigation, 1882 on Ganghwa Island. This is the first time that Korea ever made any treaty or deal with Westerners. The only treaties Korea had ever made were with China and with the Manchu and the Japanese, Oriental style treaties, East Asian style, but now the first time a modern Western treaty, 1882, and then immediately later that year, the Americans sent an ambassador and opened the first foreign embassy, the first real foreign embassy. They called it embassy and such, just there in Jongdong, right near Seoul City Hall, what is called Jongdong neighborhood behind Doksu Palace, the first embassy, the American embassy. In Mr. Sunshine, they show about this. Minister Horace Allen, one of the really important guys with his wife here, first came to Korea. He came with the first ambassador, whose name I do not remember, but he came with him. He was a medical doctor and a missionary, Christian missionary. He had a box of Bibles with him, printed in Chinese characters. The Koreans, when we made the deal in 1882, we signed the agreement there, the Schufelt Treaty. I said before, it said in there, no missionaries. The Koreans insisted on this, no Christians, no religion. And the Americans signed that, but we broke that immediately. 3 months later, when we sent our ambassador, Horace Allen was with him, and Horace Allen, he was a doctor, so they said, he's the embassy doctor. We need to have an American embassy doctor. We need that here, and Koreans said, okay. He was actually a missionary. We broke it right away. We had no intention of following that, and he became very close. He was a very important figure in what happened in the next 20 years. Became close to King Kojong and Queen Min. He founded what is today the Severance Hospital, the biggest, most famous Western-style hospital in Korea, the top VIP hospital right next to Yonsei University. He cooperated in the founding of the Beiche Boys School that later became Yonsei University, the nation's #2 university. He was part of that team setting it up. Horace Underwood, another guy named Horace. For example, Horace Underwood was a close friend and ally of his. Horace Underwood started Yonsei University, the greatest in Korea and such. So it's a big deal, and they show him here in Mr. Sunshine looking like this with his wife at the funeral. of the American who got shot. And that the United States minister in legation to Korea, so essentially the ambassador in 1897, such, and fired in 1905 because he tried to defend Korea. As Japan won the war against Russia in 1905, which is a big deal, and America started to back off and say, okay, Japan, do what you want. And he protested, so he said, no, we must protect Korea. Korea should be an independent country. They're good people, and such. He kept telling the President of the United States, and the President fired him for that. Let somebody else take the job. This is their scene at the cemetery, which is now called Yanghwajin Foreigner Cemetery. They show it here just kind of beginning, a few graves. Today it's crowded. There's several dozen graves. It's down there by the Han River near the Mapo subway station, if you ever want to get there, by the river. It's right by the Joldusan, where the Korean Catholics had their heads cut off. There, that Joldusan mountain, it's part of that same hill, the Yanghwajin Foreigner Cemetery. Koreans consider it a really bad luck place, bad fortune, by Unsujiri, which is Korean version of like feng shui, earth energy, a very bad luck place. So they let the foreigners build their cemetery there for their dead people. It's still there today with all those graves from 1880s, 1890s, the 1900 era of the foreigners who died here, including their like little children, 2 years old, who died from some sickness back in those days, all the way to some of the very great famous figures among Westerners here. They're in that cemetery, and they have the gravestones. It's a very interesting place to visit, and there's a Catholic church up there to memorialize Jildusan. We should do a Hippie Korea tour there someday.
Oh, yes, we can do that.
In 1894, Korea had a big rebellion. The farmers were hungry, they were starved. There was a long drought for several years, not enough water, there wasn't enough crops. Farmers were hungry, government was taking everything from the farmers as taxes and such. A big rebellion. It started in like Chungcheongdo area, Chungcheongbuk-do, near what is now Songnisan National Park. The Donghak Rebellion. It was also religious, had a religious character, the Donghak religion, which later became Chundogyo, a very nationalistic, patriotic kind of Korean religion, which still exists today. Still exists, although it's dying. The Donghak Rebellion, they almost lost. They were rebelling against the Joseon Kingdom and also rebelling against foreigners. They wanted to kill all the foreigners and get foreigners out of Korea, including Japanese. The Japanese who were selling the factory products, remember, like kitchen pots and pans and stuff, selling from little shops. The Donghak attacked that and tried to kill the Japanese family, burn their shop. Also American missionaries, Christian missionaries, attacked and killed. There were many rumors and such about these evil foreigners. They wanted to destroy that. This nearly destroyed the Joseon dynasty. Joseon almost lost. China sent soldiers here, once again, to help Korea, help the Joseon dynasty government and fight this rebellion. They sent some Manchu soldiers, but China was very corrupt and very weak by that time, so the Chinese soldiers were not very good. Then Japan sends their army by 1895. This gave them the excuse, because these Donghak Korean rebels, they were killing Japanese citizens. Merchants, like I said, and American missionaries too, whatever, but killing Japanese citizens, that gave Japan legal justification that they could send their soldiers to Korea to protect their own citizens. The United States still does things like that today, and so does other big countries, powerful countries. You defend your citizens in some foreign country that is internationally legal. So Japan did that. They sent their army in. They fought the Donghak rebels and helped to defeat them. Also, they fought the Chinese soldiers and kicked them out of Korea. Defeated the last of the Manchu soldiers and drove them out of Korea. So now Japan was the power in Korea by 1895. They had their army here. Nobody else had an army in Korea, and the Korean army was not much. Not much to talk about. Japan had, by this time, 1895, Japan had a very modern army with good guns, repeating rifles and machine guns, even crank-turn machine guns, and they had like armored vehicles, big trucks with armor on them, kind of like a tank that could move through, and a modern army by our standards, and ships, battleships, such. So, after defeating everybody, driving out, and the Japanese army getting control of Korea, the next thing they did was murder Queen Min. Remember, she was smart. She was the best one playing politics with everybody and helping to defend Korea as much as Korea could be defended. So they killed her. They said, basically, we're not sure who killed her. We don't know. Some people say it was Japanese army soldiers, but in plain clothing, regular clothing, took off their uniforms. Other people say it was Japanese gangster groups, such as the Black Dragon Society, which is called in Mr. Sunshine called Mushin, the Mushin army of Dongnae. Dongnae. Some say it was these Japanese gangsters, some kind of paramilitary force. As many countries have, not only regular army, but they have extra kind of tough guy soldiers who do special murder operations. America does this. The CIA military guys and such. Whatever. Everybody does this these days. Kind of paramilitary, shall we say? Paramilitary, and they were allied with gangsters. Japan already had real modern gangsters, kind of Japanese mafia. We call them the Yakuza. Tough guys running prostitution and gambling and drugs. Those kind of organizations often intersect with paramilitary organizations as right-wingers to do special killing, special murder for money. They're kind of gangsters, they're kind of military, they are patriotic to their country, maybe, but also very self-interested, those kind of things already. This led to the Black Dragon Society. They showed this in Mr. Sunshine. First of all, as Dongme joining the Black Dragon Society, Koreans protested about this. Koreans didn't like that, so they changed the name to Mushin. Mushin, they called them the Mushin Gang, and later, all the later episodes show Dongme together with the Mushin doing terrible things, but then later he goes against his Mushin and joins Joseon, because he loves Aishin, et cetera, all that kind of stuff. Now, the Black Dragon Society really started in 1901. It was not this early, but they're combining different other Japanese organizations, some kind of gangsters. There were many different things. The Black Dragon Society was just one. It really started in 1901, opposing the Russians. The first purpose of the Black Dragon Society was Japanese gangsters who wanted to stop the Russians from coming into Korea. And then there was a war in 1905 between Japan and Russia. They had a war about Korea. That's when they started. They were trying to assassinate Russian officials or Russian businessmen. Yeah. This is a French magazine showing the killing of the Queen of Korea. That's Queen Min laying on the ground. Those things, and the Japanese gangsters breaking it. This is the way a French magazine did the cartoon to show this. This really did happen. They killed like 15 women altogether. Not the queen, but also her servants. They killed them and they cut their bodies apart, chopped them up, put the body parts together in a pile in the courtyard there in Gyeongbok Palace, and put kerosene on it and lit it on fire. To just, again, to be very insulting, to destroy the body so that the queen could not be buried. There couldn't be a funeral. They were very vicious and nasty about this. And the thing is, it said here, now we get to Mr. Sunshine, this is where they're showing what they called the Black Dragon Society, but then they called it the Mushin Gang. And he joins it because now remember his story. Remember, he's a butcher's son, the son of a butcher, and butchers were the lowest people, together with prostitutes and utter labor, slaves, the lowest people in Joseon Dynasty. And you see his parents get abused, and his parents are killed by a Yangban official early in the very first episode. And little boy, Dongmei, he runs away, and he's just the son of a butcher, so nobody will help him. Nobody get anything, but he manages to escape, and he gets to Japan, and he becomes a gangster, and he's against Joseon. He hates Joseon Dynasty because of what they did to his parents. Killing his parents for being butchers, being worthless people. And many Koreans protested about this, the reason why they changed it and such. They said, oh, you're showing that Joseon Dynasty was so cruel, that they treated butchers so badly, and that Yangban would just kill them for no reason, just to avoid a small debt or something. People complained about this, but no, it was really true. Joseon Dynasty was that bad, and there were many young men and young women in Joseon Dynasty who really hated their government, hated the government, and they would have been willing to join Japanese gangsters. Yes, they would. They would be willing to do that. They really hated because the society was very cruel, very savage. It wasn't fair. There was no justice for low-class people. And some people, like him, became rebels. People protest, say, no, it's impossible. No Korean person would ever join Japanese gangsters to kill the Queen of Korea and go against the government. But yes, it was true. Yes, they would. And that happens in every country. Every country has traitors. Every country has people who hate the government for some reason, think it's unfair, and they want to overthrow the government and join with foreigners. Later, I will mention opium dens. They show Dongmei by the 22nd episode, episode 22. They show him wasting away here in an opium den. You see your opium pipes. This is a very Chinese sort of a thing. And Dongmei, suppose it was in China at that time, maybe Shanghai, wasting away because he had just given up everything, just being a drug addict. But then he wakes up and he leaves there and he gets back to Joseon and he loves Aishin and he ends up fighting to help save Joseon from the Japanese. This heroic story, but he's here. And opium dens, it's a thing started by the British, bringing opium from India into China. By 1820, it's a symbol of imperialism. So it kind of fits this way in the drama, which is all about anti-imperialism, to resist him. The very worst aspects of imperialism were like this, bringing deadly drugs into China and selling them widely and getting Chinese people and some Korean people. Opium dens, opium addiction was never such a big deal in Korea. It became a really big deal in China, a big social problem right through the early 20th century. And when the communists took over China, it's one of the big things they did was get rid of all drugs and cure all the addicts. And there were millions of drug addicts in China by that time. It was never such a big problem in Korea for Korean people. They never let it get that far. After Queen Min was killed, Gojong moved out of Gyeongbok Palace. Remember, they killed Queen Min in Gyeongbok Palace. It's today in the back right corner of Gyeongbok Palace. If you go beyond the beautiful pond with the tea pavilion all the way to the back of the palace, and on the right side, there's the compound where they actually killed Queen Min, and now there's a stone monument there for that incident. He was afraid. He was afraid the Japanese were going to kill him next. Nobody was ever arrested, do you understand, for killing the Queen of Korea, those gangsters. Nobody ever arrested. The Japanese were that much powerful by 1895. The Korean police, they're looking, who did this? Who did it? And the Japanese police said, leave it alone. We don't know who did it. We don't know. Don't investigate. Nobody was ever arrested for that crime. That shows already by 1895 how powerful Japan was. Now, Jongdong neighborhood, again, is behind Doksu Palace, and that's where all the foreigners were. Again, it's another place that Koreans thought was bad luck. By Pungsujiri, or Feng Shui, Koreans thought that area has bad energy. It's at the bottom foot of Inwangsan, the very end of the low ridge of Inwangsan Mountain. And the Koreans always thought it had bad luck an early queen of the Joseon dynasty had her tomb there. One of Taejong's mothers, and King Taejong had the tomb dug up and scattered his mother's bones around and used pieces of her tomb to build the Gwangyo Bridge there, which is now being reconstructed, and you can go under the bridge and you can see the designs carved in the rock. It's from the tomb of his mother. Not his actual mother, his stepmother, but he hated her. Her tomb was originally at Jungdong. That's why it's called. Got that name for it. And no Koreans didn't want to live there. Only very poor Koreans lived in that area. All the Yangban, the nobles, they wouldn't live there. It was bad fortune. So when the American ambassador came in from Incheon, and hello, I'm ambassador from America. The Korean said, oh, you live over here. Hey, we got some nice land for you, very nice land.